Daf Yomi, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 61b, top of the page, with the words My Shna. In what way is he different from us? We were in a discussion. The last line was talking about in what way does Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda disagree, principally with regard to the case of one who incites others to worship him. And the others say to him, yes, we will worship you. So one sage, being Rabbi Meir, holds that when one incites others to worship him, they are apt to listen to him. And the response that they say yes is sincere. And Rabbi Yehuda says that when a human being says to worship him, then people wouldn't be, or not really, they would just say they say like, why is he different than us? Inside themselves are saying that. They're kind of doing it, just to, I guess, to ridicule him is what they say here. Now we're on top of 61b. Maishna Ihud Minan Didan in Kamri Achoche Allah. In what way is he different than us? It's nonsense. So they're saying yes to worship him, to ridicule him. Umas nisan kam yachid hanisas kam berabim hanisasim. Yachid lo mimlach v'tai basrei, rabim mimlachai v'lo ta'u basrei. And the contradiction between the Mishnayot can be resolved as follows. There, where the Mishnah states that one is liable for speech alone, the reference is to an individual who was incited. Here, where the Mishnah indicates that one is not liable for speech alone, it is referring to a case of an incited multitude of people. The Gemara explains, an individual who was incited does not typically change his mind, and he goes astray after idol worship. Therefore, once he agrees to the suggestion to worship an idol, he has fully accepted the idol upon himself as a god and is liable. By contrast, a multitude of people are apt to change their minds, and consequently, they do not go astray after idol worship. Amar Rav Yosef ben Amin ala lichtiv lo to'av lo v'lo tishma ilav ha'ava v'shama chayav. Rav Yosef said, from where do I say that the halacha that one is liable for merely stating that he will worship an idol is referring to an individual who was incited? Rav Yosef said, from where do I say that the halacha that one is liable for merely stating that he will worship an idol is referring to an individual who is incited, as it is written with regard to one who incites people to engage in idol worship? You shall not approve of him, nor listen to him. Deuteronomy 13 verse 9, which indicates that if one approved and listened to the inciter, stating his intention to engage in idol worship, he is liable even if he does not actually worship an idol. Eis ve'abaye mishani ben nisas abim nisas yochid ve'atanya ki yasidcha chicha ben imecha echad yachid hanisat ve'echad ram hanisatim ve'hoitzi akosef Yochid Michlal Rabim Michlal Yochid. Abaye raised an objection to Rav Yosef's opinion. Is there a difference in halacha between the cases of an incited multitude of people and an individual who was incited? But isn't it taught in Braita with regard to the verse, if your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your neighbor who is like your own soul, incites you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, Deuteronomy 13, verse 7, that both an individual who was incited and an incited multitude of people are included in this halacha. But the verse singles out the individual from the category of the multitude, and another verse singles out the multitude from the category of the individual. Yachid miklal rabim lehachmir al gufo ulehakel al mamono. The Torah states separately the halachot of an individual who incited to engage in idol worship, and of an entire city that is subverted to engage in idol worship, in order to distinguish between the two cases as follows. An individual who was incited is singled out from the category of a subverted multitude of people in order to render the punishment to an individual's body more stringent. The individual is executed by stoning, whereas the residents of an idolatrous city are executed by decapitation. And an individual was singled out to render the treatment of the property of an individual who was incited more lenient, as it is not destroyed like that of the residents of an idolatrous city. Rabba miklal yachid lehakel al gufam ulehachmir al mamonam. Additionally, the Torah singles out the subverted multitude of people from the category of an individual who was incited in order to render the punishment given to the bodies of the residents of an idolatrous city, decapitation, more lenient than that given to an individual who was incited, and to render the treatment of their property more stringent, as the city and the property of its residents are burned. Abaye concluded his objection to Rav Yosef's opinion. It can be inferred from the Braise that only with regard to this matter, meaning the halachot, mentioned in the Braise is the halacha of an individual who was incited different than that of an incited multitude of people. But with regard to all the other halachic matters, they are the same. Therefore, a distinction cannot be made between them with regard to the halacha in the case of a verbal commitment to idol worship. Ela amar Abaye, kam b'nisas mipi atzmoi, kam b'nisas mipi acherim, mipi atzmoi mimalech, mipni achem grir batraihu. Rather, Abaye said that the contradiction between the Mishnayot can be resolved as follows. Here, where the Mishnah indicates that one is liable only for actual worship, the reference is to one incited by himself. No one incited him to idol worship, and he made the decision on his own. Whereas there, in the Mishnah that deems one liable for saying that he will worship an idol, the reference is to one who is incited by others. The reason for the difference is that one who makes the decision on his own is apt to change his mind, whereas one who is incited by others is drawn after them and is unlikely to change his mind. Amar Abaye mino amina le dichtiv lo toa velo velo tishma elav avishamachayev. Abaye said, from where do I say that this distinction is correct? As it is written, you shall not approve of him nor listen to him. Deuteronomy 13 verse 9. Lo tov velo velo tishma elav. Referring to an individual who tried to incite him, and the verse indicates that if one approves of and listened to the inciter, he is liable even for the approval alone. Rava Amar Idi ve'idi b'nisat mipi acherim, hadi Amar le kach ocheret kan shosa, kach metiva, kach meria, hadi lo Amar le kach ocheles, kach shota v'chule. Rava says both this Mishnah and that Mishnah are referring to one incited by others, and they should be differentiated as follows. That Mishnah, which deems one liable for merely expressing approval, is referring to a case where the inciter described the qualities of the idol and said to him, it eats like this, it drinks like this, it does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. In this case, expressing approval verbally suffices to render one liable, as he was evidently convinced by the description. This Mishnah, which indicates that one is not liable for speech alone, is referring to a case where the insider did not say to him, it eats like this and drinks like this, it does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. אלוהי העמים אשר סביבותיכם הקרובים אליך. מה לי קרובים ומה לי רחוקים? אחי כאמר לך, מטיבוסן של קרובים, אתה למה טיבוסן של רחוקים. Rava said, from where do I say that this distinction is correct? As it is written, let us go and worship other gods from the gods of the peoples that surround you. The ones near to you or the ones far from you. Deuteronomy 13:7-8. What difference is there to me whether they are near, and what difference is there to me whether they are far? Why would the difference affect the prohibition? Rather, this is what the Torah is saying to you. Do not be tempted to listen to the insider, as from the nature of the objects of idol worship that are near you, which you recognize to be false, you can derive what the nature is of the ones that are far from you. Therefore, if you are told that there is an idol in a distant land that is real, realize that it is a lie. It is from this interpretation that Rava derives the halachic distinction. What is it? Not referring to a case where the insider described to another the qualities of the idol and says to him, it eats like this, it drinks like this, does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. Conclude from it that only in such a case is the incited person liable for merely saying his approval. Rav Ashi Amar Seifa B'Yisrael V'Shulman. Rav Ashi says that there is a different resolution to the contradiction between the Mishnayot. The latter clause of the Mishnah in 67a, which deems one liable for speech alone, is referring to an apostate Jew. Since he is already an apostate, his stated commitment to idol worship is certainly final. Consequently, he is liable. By contrast, a regular Jew is not liable for speech alone. Okay. Ravina Amar Lo Zuav Sukitani. Ravina says that there's no contradiction. Rather, the Tana teaches the Mishnah employing the style of not this, but also that. In other words, the Tana first teaches the elementary halacha that one who worships an idol is liable, and afterward he teaches the more novel halacha that even one who merely says that he will engage in idol worship is immediately liable. It was stated that a Moraim engaged in dispute concerning the following matter. In the case of one who worships idols due to his love of another who requested that he bow down to it, or due to fear of someone coercing him to, but not due to faith in an idol, was halacha. So, Abaye says he is liable, but Rava says he is pater. Ha'oved avoda zara me'ahava u'meyera. If someone worships an idol due to his love for another who requested his vow, or due to fear of someone, what's the halacha? Abaye says he's liable, and Rava says he's pater. Abaye amar chayev hapalcha. Abaye says he's chayev because he worshipped it. Abaye says he's liable because he worshipped it. Rava amar pater ikal leiba aloha in ila lo. Rava says he is exempt, as the criterion for becoming liable for idol worship is as follows. If one sincerely accepted the idol upon himself as a god, yes, he is liable, but if he did not accept it sincerely, he is not liable. Siman, the sim. Wow, Itmar, interesting. Ha'ovid avodazav yahav yira. And we know that the halacha is like Rava, unless it's Yal Kagam. So we hold like Rava then. Siman Eved Ishtach Avel Mashiach. Abaye attempts to cite several proofs, and whose mnemonic is a slave will bow down to the Messiah, to the anointed. A slave will bow down to the anointed. That's interesting. Eved Ishtach Avel Mashiach. Can I write that down? Eved yishtachaveh leMashiach. No, you have to be strong. Abaye attempts to cite several proofs, and now a slave will bow down to the anointed. Okay. Abaye Amra Abaye Menani Minila Detnan. Oivid Avodah Zareh. This is interesting stuff here. Huh. 61b. Wow. Okay. 61b. Okay. How are we doing on time? Oh, 16, we gotta go. Okay, Abaye said, Abaye said, from where do I say that one who worships idols due to love or fear is liable? As we learned in the Mishnah, one who worships idols is executed by stoning. This includes one who worships an idol, and one who slaughters an animal as an idolatrous offering, and one who burns incense as an idolatrous offering. What is added by the Mishnah by stating twice one who worships? Is it not to include the case of one who worships idols due to love or due to fear, in addition to the case of one who worships idols out of faith? Evidently, in this case as well, the worshipper is liable. Rava Amarlach Lo Kedemitaretz Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rava could have said to you in response to the term, one who worships should not be understood as Abaye suggested. Rather, as Rabbi Yirmiyah explains it, namely, that one who worships an idol in its standard manner of worship is liable, and one who sacrifices an idolatrous offering is liable, even if that is not the standard manner of worship of that particular idol. Amar Abaye ben Amin Allah Detanya lo tishach lahem iyat mishtachaveh aval ata mishtachaveh la'adam k'motcha yachal afilu ne'evad kahaman tamad lo amar v'lo tavdem v'hahamam yira havi ne'evad. Abaye attempts to cite another proof for his opinion. He said, from where do I say that one who worships idols due to love or fear is liable? As it is taught in Braita with regard to the verse, you shall not bow to them nor worship them. Exodus 20, verse 5. To them, to idols, you may not bow, but you may bow to a person like yourself. Bowing to a person is merely the acceptance of authority. One might have thought that it is permitted to bow even to a person who is worshipped like a god, like Haman. Therefore, the verse states, nor worship them, meaning any form of pagan worship is prohibited. Abaye concludes, and wasn't Haman worshipped due to fear? And not because the people consider him a god? Evidently, one who engages in idol worship due to fear is liable. But Rava, and Rava will tell you, he'll explain that. Kehaman v'lo kehaman. Kehaman de'iu gufei avodah zarah. V'lo kehaman de'filo haman mira v'achala mira. And Rava explains this right as follows. One might have thought that it is permitted to bow down even to a person like Haman in one regard, but not like Haman in all aspects. It is referring to one like Haman in that Haman himself was an object of idol worship, as he claimed he was a god, and one who worships a person out of belief in his divinity is liable. But the reference is to one who is not like Haman in all aspects, as while Haman was worshipped due to fear, and one who engages in idol worship due to fear is not liable. Here the reference is to one who worships a person not due to fear, but he believes in a person's divinity. Rabbi Omer Abaye furthermore said, from where do I say my opinion? It is taught in a Braita, if an anointed priest, a high priest, unwittingly engaged in idol worship, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says he brings an offering for the unwitting act, And the rabbis say a high priest does not bring an offering for an unwitting act of idol worship unless it was due to a lapse of awareness concerning the fundamental halachot of idol worship. I mean, he thought this action was halachically permitted. It's very hard to say that a Kohen Gadol at that level would think that it's permitted. But anyway, okay, Vishavin shebeseira kiyachid Vishavin ke'ein mevi asham talui. And they agree that a high priest brings a female goat as his offering to atone for his act of idol worship, as does an ordinary individual, and not a bull, as a high priest brings as a sin offering for other sins. And they agree that a high priest does not bring a provisional guilt offering, which is ordinarily brought by one who is uncertain as to whether he committed a sin, that requires him to bring a sin offering. In such a case, he is exempt. Hi, shigigat maaseh devoid zare hechidami ikasav beit hakneset hu vishtachavelo hare libo l'shamayim el dachaza indarata vishtachavelo. Abai infers, what are the circumstances of the high priest's unwitting act of idol worship that is not due to a lack of awareness of the fundamental halachot of idol worship? If the high priest thought that a certain building was a synagogue and bowed to it, and then he realized that it is a house of idol worship, why should he be obligated to bring an offering? Even according to the opinion of Yehuda Nasi, since his heart was directed towards heaven. It is not even an unwitting transgression. Rather, it is a case where the high priest saw the statue of a person bowed to it. This is the case. This case must be clarified. If he accepted that person upon himself as a god, he is an unintentional transgressor, and he is liable to receive the death penalty and not to bring an offering.